Hello and welcome back to another Mr. Carter Science Specials. In this video we'll be looking at the blood vessels and their functions and structures. Before we get onto that though, we've got two quick questions. Try and pause the video now, see if you can answer these questions before we go through the answers. Question 1. Explain why small or single-celled organisms do not need a transport system. And explain why Question 2. Explain why large multicellular organisms do need a transport system. So if we have a look at this particular small organism here, it's an amoeba. That means it's a protocyst and it can exist as a single cell. In this case, the single cell has a radius of about 0.1 millimeters or 100 micrometers. And that's an incredibly small distance. So this particular unicellular organism can obtain all its needs, all its nutrients, glucose, oxygen from the environment by using only simple diffusion. It's rapid enough for all the cell's needs. But why is that? Well, if we look at the transport in small organisms, small cells have a very large surface area compared to their volume. This is known as the surface area to volume ratio. If you look down here, we can explain the maths of this, that as we decrease the volume, that compared to that smaller and smaller volume, we get a larger and larger surface area. So for very small objects, we might get a surface area to volume ratio of 6:1, but when we're looking at a larger object, it might be something like 3:2. So if we've got a large surface area compared to a volume, this will allow a fast rate of diffusion. Bacteria and other single organisms can absorb all their oxygen and nutrients from the environment by diffusion. And single-celled organisms have a very low metabolic demands, so the cells don't use much of the oxygen or nutrients and they only produce a small amount of carbon dioxide. So because of the large surface area to volume ratio and the small metabolic demands, simple diffusion is more than enough for a single-celled organism. However, if we're looking at transport in multicellular organisms, well, as multicellular organism will have a very small surface area compared to an incredibly large volume. So their cells cannot absorb all the nutrients they need from the environment by diffusion. The distance is just too great for oxygen to diffuse from the outside of your body, say into the middle of your brain or into the middle of your digestive system. It's too far. So multicellular organisms will need a transport network. And here we've got a wonderful diagram here showing you all the different blood vessels in a human. This is somebody who's died and had their blood vessels filled with a red plastic. And as their body has decomposed away, it's allowed the red plastic to stay to show us all the different blood vessels that there are. In particular, the large amounts in the lungs and in the brain and in the organs. I think down here we have perhaps the kidneys down there. So these blood vessels provide a transport network, and they have a dual function of not just carrying substances around the body, but providing a large surface area for the cells to absorb all the nutrients and oxygen that they need by diffusion. Now, when we look at circulatory systems or transport systems, there's actually two types. There's a single circulatory system that you find in fish and a double circulatory system that you can find in humans. So here's another little task for you. See if you can try this question, question 3. Describe the single circulatory system and explain how fish gills are adapted for gas exchange. So pause the video now, write it down, and let's see how much you've already learned from your normal science lessons. If you need a little bit of help, we have 3 paragraphs here which will help you to answer that question. Again, you can pause the video to see how much you've learnt and whether you can fill in these gaps. So if we describe a single circulatory system, then just in the description, in the fish, the heart pumps deoxygenated blood to the gills. So here's the heart made up of the atrium and the ventricle, and it's carrying blood that's been all around the capillaries in the fish body. So they've come back with very little oxygen because it's been used up in respiration. So this is deoxygenated blood. The blood is then pumped to the gills, and in the gills the blood picks up oxygen and becomes oxygenated here. Carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the water, and the oxygenated blood then travels around the body to the cells in the muscles where oxygen is used in respiration. Fish gills are very well adapted for gas exchange because they have a very large surface area and very thin permeable lining, so diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide is fast. The gills also have a good blood supply to maintain the concentration gradients, which, as you remember from diffusion, are important to maintain a high rate of diffusion if we have a large difference in the concentrations where you're moving from and to. And your exam phrase there, maintain the diffusion gradient, or maintain the concentration gradients. So in humans and in most mammals, we have a double circulatory system. And what this means is, if you look at the heart here, that the blood will flow through the heart twice on its journey around the body. So we've got a very simplified diagram here. So if we start in the heart with the oxygenated blood, that oxygenated blood will come out of the heart, it will go around the body, and then as the oxygen is used up in respiration and the blood becomes rich in carbon dioxide, the deoxygenated blood in blue is sent back to the heart. At this point there's very low pressure in that blood, so it needs a bit more of a squeeze to increase the pressure so that the deoxygenated blood can be sent to the lungs, where it will pick up oxygen, and then out of the lungs the oxygenated blood now will travel back to the heart. So for one journey around the body, from the lungs to the body cells and back to the lungs, blood actually passes through the heart twice. Now in our diagrams we use the blue colour to show deoxygenated blood, but in real life deoxygenated blood is a very dark red colour. When it picks up oxygen it becomes a very vibrant red colour. Sometimes if you look at your veins you'll say, but my veins are blue, but that's just like saying that we have a colourful pen here, and that inside the ink will be blue just because the pen is a blue colour on the outside. That's not necessarily so. In fact, if you look carefully, there's a picture of somebody on the outside of a pen. Does that mean inside the pen that this is going to have people inside it or pictures inside it? No. Your veins have a blue colour on the outside, but they carry dark red blood. So here is a slightly more detailed diagram of the human circulatory system. And one of the things to notice are the major blood vessels which are contained within your respiratory system. For example, we have the aorta, which carries blood under incredibly high pressure all around your body. It carries oxygenated blood. And then we have on the other side the pulmonary artery carrying blood to the lungs, and the pulmonary artery is the only artery to carry deoxygenated blood. All of our arteries will carry oxygenated blood. We also have the vena cava carrying deoxygenated blood into the heart. It is a vein, the largest vein in your body, and we have the pulmonary vein here taking blood to the lungs. Draw it in correctly. Taking blood from the lungs, and the pulmonary vein is the only vein which carries oxygenated blood. All other veins carry deoxygenated blood. A couple of other major organs that you need to be aware of is the kidney, and in Latin we refer to the kidney as the renal organ, or the adjective renal. So the kidney has an artery going to the kidney and away from the heart called the renal artery. and then leaving the kidney and going back to the heart is the renal vein. Similarly, the liver is described as hepatic in Latin, so we look at the hepatic artery carrying the blood away from the heart and to the liver, and the hepatic vein carrying the blood away from the liver and into the heart. But the liver is unusual in that it has a second vein known as the hepatic portal vein, and this is the hepatic portal vein leads from the digestive system to the liver, and that allows the liver to process any of the chemicals and nutrients that you have absorbed through digestion. So it could break down alcohol that you have drunk, for example, or it could store extra glucose if you've had a very sugary meal. So what are the three main blood vessels then? Well, as we've just discussed, they are arteries, which carry blood away from the heart, and in most cases that is oxygenated blood. The veins, which carry blood into the heart, and again in most cases that is deoxygenated blood. How can we remember the difference? Well, if we write the word artery, underneath we can write the word away just to help us remember, and if we write the word vein, already it has the word in underneath there, so we can remember veins carry blood in to the heart. But there is a third blood vessel, the capillaries. In a capillary, I generally write them with a red start and a blue finish because the blood will change from oxygenated to deoxygenated because the oxygen is diffusing into tissue cells for use in respiration, and carbon dioxide made in the respiration is diffusing out of the tissue cells and into the blood. So the capillaries are the site where we have lots and lots of diffusion going on. So again, here is a nice way of remembering: veins going into the heart, arteries away, and the capillaries link arteries to veins, and the blood changes from oxygenated to deoxygenated. So what about the structure and the function of these blood vessels? How is their structure matched to their function? Well, arteries have a very narrow lumen, and this allows the blood to stay under very high blood pressure. That blood has to be flowing for a very long distance, so it needs an incredibly high blood pressure, which is created by the ventricle walls of the heart when they contract. But to keep that high blood pressure, arteries have a narrow lumen, and the lumen is the inside tube of the arteries. So if I took a pen like this, for example, and if I remove the inside of that pen, if I can manage to do that. So if we look at the inside of this pen, it's now just a hollow tube, but the center of that tube is called the lumen, and that's the same for any tube or any blood vessel, but the center of that blood vessel is known as the lumen. So with arteries, the lumen is very, very narrow to help maintain the high blood pressure. We also have a very, very thick muscle wall, which will stretch under pressure and allow you to feel your pulse. There will also be no valves to interrupt the blood flow in arteries, again to keep the speed and the pressure. In a vein, they will have a very wide lumen. I know it doesn't look it in this diagram, but that distance there will be incredibly wide, much wider than it will be in an artery. They will also have quite thin muscle walls, and this is due to the fact that the veins have blood at low blood pressure. But to help the veins to send the blood back to the heart, veins also have valves, and valves will make blood flow in one direction only. In fact, when you move around, the muscles in your legs and your arms will actually squeeze the blood in the veins and help the blood to move and flow through the veins, and the valves will prevent the backflow of blood. Capillaries. Capillaries carry blood from arteries to veins through the body's tissues, and they have an incredibly narrow lumen. In fact, that lumen is just one red blood cell thick, actually just slightly smaller than one red blood cell. And this slows the movement of blood through the capillaries, which gives time and allows diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide to happen. Capillaries have a very large surface area that allow gases and the nutrients to diffuse quickly in and out of the cells, and the wall of the capillaries is just 1 cell thick, and this will allow a fast rate of diffusion. So here, if you are ever asked to describe the structure of a capillary and how it is adapted to its function, you could easily get 4 marks on this. Large surface area, very narrow lumen, which allow the diffusion of gases very quickly and very in and out of the cells. They also have walls which are 1 cell thick. This gives you just a short distance for the gases to move in and out, and again a fast rate of diffusion. But if we go back and look at those veins for a moment and we think about the use of those valves, what would happen if blood loses so much energy that it stops and it turns around? We've got to think carefully that in your vein, the blood is constantly fighting against gravity. It's trying to get higher up in your body. But if it doesn't have enough energy, then just like the diagram shows you here, that blood will move up and then it will start to move down again with the flow of gravity. So the solution is this. Firstly, your veins have valves, so that when the blood moves up through the valves, like this, the valves will open and allow that blood to flow through them. But when the blood begins to turn around and move backwards, those valves will close and prevent the backflow of blood. The other nifty solution is to use muscular massage, where your normal body muscles in your legs and in your arms will contract and squeeze the blood in the veins, as you can see here. And as they squeeze that blood, the blood is forced up through the veins, and when those muscles contract, the blood will then flow backwards, but it will be stopped by the valves. This is particularly important if you're on aeroplanes, whereby you won't be moving around very much, and it is possible that the blood could sit on top of a valve and form a blood clot. So whenever you get on an aeroplane, you will often hear an announcement talking to you about exercising and the importance of moving around the aeroplane, or even just flexing the muscles and moving your legs and your feet in your seat to make certain that these muscles are still contracting and still moving the blood and preventing the formation of blood clots and a disease called DVT, deep vein thrombosis. A thrombosis is a blood clot in your veins. That's particularly important because when you get off the aeroplane and you start to move around again and your muscles in your legs start to push for blood again, they can be pushing a blood clot around your body, which if it reaches your brain or your coronary artery in your heart could cause a stroke or a heart attack. So I hope you've enjoyed this video on blood vessels. Please like and subscribe so you'll get the next videos as we make them. Please comment below to let me know what you've learned from this video and whether you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.